As we said just before coming on air, Penn State found a new and interesting way to do the same thing, which is not score enough points and keep a team close, but ultimately lose. 21-17. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Welcome to the BWI Live show here on Monday. Hope you're having a great Monday as we head into the holiday season. I've got the festively dressed Nate Bauer above me as well. Is that a cardigan, sir?
Sure is. It's cold out, T. Frank. If I had a fire in my house, that would be a better place to sit. But I don't have a fire in my house.
Well, if you had a fireplace and you were wearing that, you are one of those writing caps away from being a cliche.
Yeah, I mean, I if I could have a glass of scotch right now, I would.
It's noon. Come on. Well, no, I agree with you. Dave Eckert, do you have any scotch? How you doing today?
I do not have any scotch. Scotch would kill me instantly. However, I am doing good. No cardigan, hoodie today. But yeah, I'm excited.
Cold day here in November as we move into the later stages of the football season. Penn State, as we talked about, lost yesterday 21-17 to Michigan. And you have to start with the Penn State offense, as we do every week. But, Nate, you were doing a bunch of work on Sunday in terms of looking at the season as a whole now that we have most of the hay in the barn. What was telling to you about the Penn State offense and their efficiency and their output this season when you took a look at everything?
Yeah, this is honestly some of the best insight that I've ever come up with, and you guys are going to be stunned to hear this, but Penn State has a problem scoring points. They try, but they can't score points, and so that is the issue with Penn State's. No, I mean it's like it is dismally bad. It's worse than it actually seems. The number that I pulled yesterday was offensively, right? So they've had a defensive touchdown. And their numbers were better, obviously, against non-conference opponents. In the Big Ten, the offense is scoring 16.88 points per game.
So they were basically on track yesterday or on Saturday when they scored 17 points against Michigan. That's exactly what you should expect as the output against any Big Ten team.
Like, it just 2 touchdowns and a field goal is not going to get it done against basically anyone. And the deal for Penn State is they're not playing just anyone. They have all 5 of the 5 best teams in the conference on the schedule.
Right.
And so as a result, it just, you can't, there is no way to compete in a world where you're playing that caliber of a team and then producing 17 points a game. It's a non-starter.
And yet, at this point in the season, they've been in every single game they've played, which is it's just a bizarre season. And we'll get to the Penn State defense later in the show, as we usually do. Dave, all those numbers, they don't paint the same picture we saw of what Mike Yurcich was able to do offensively, both at his first stop at Texas last year, previously as the passing game coordinator at Ohio State, and, of course, back at Oklahoma State, where he had his longest run as an offensive coordinator, putting up lots of points. Now, obviously, Big 12 is different than Big 10, but are you surprised how far away from the offensive output you were you expecting more than this coming into the season?
Yeah, no question about it. I think we've reached the point where it's pretty fair to ask some of those questions. But again, kind of hopping on the stat train with Nate, right? In games against FBS opponents, so this excludes Villanova, which might actually help Penn State here because they were terrible offensively for a lot of that. Penn State averages 4.8 yards per play. That is 109th in the FBS. That is tied with Northwestern and Texas State and UNLV. So this is not a good offense. This is a bad offense, right? You can talk about like getting unlucky, and, maybe not finishing some drives, and that's all true. But from like a pure efficiency standpoint, it's clearly not good. It's not a good offense by definition. So,
Right.
it hasn't been good enough.
The weird thing is, and my film analysis is up at Blue White Illustrated right now. If you want to go check that out after the show, they're not bad at moving the football. Penn State has been a team that has been able to put together methodical drives. They've been able to put together plays. They put together 86 plays against one of the best. Now, the Michigan defense is legitimately a great unit from front to back. From scheme to players, they're a good defense. And they were able to put 86 plays together and 340-some yards. And yet, it's something new every week. That's the thing that I find interesting, Nate, is that it's not like red zone was an issue early in the season. I do understand that some of that came against non-conference opponents. But they've been able to put the ball in the end zone with great plays from Jahan Dotson and from their receivers, and Sean Clifford has been accurate in those situations. And then all of a sudden this week they weren't.
But the problem is after you said Jahan Dotson, I think that you paused because it was tough to think of the next name. And that's the issue with Penn State's offense this season is I'm writing it right now. Penn State has 28 offensive touchdowns this season. 28 in 10 games. That's bad. They had 32 last year in a conference-only schedule in which they played 9 games. So one more game, 4 fewer touchdowns, and last year was a resounding disappointment for Penn State football. So like that's what we're comparing it against. It's just not to the level. And the dagger, the indictment is Jahan Dotson has 10 of them.
Yeah.
He's got 10 of those 28 touchdowns. Now, obviously, Sean Clifford is going to be responsible for and is responsible for all but one of the passing touchdowns. That's fine. That's what you expect. But the top rushing touchdowns, they have 10 total. Clifford has 2. Dotson has 1. Noah Cain has 4. They don't have like for the drop off to be so severe that your leading touchdown haver, right, among the skill positions at Jahan Dotson with 10, and then the next closest be Noah Cain with 4 against Brenton Strange with 3. Like your next highest touchdown getter should not be less than half of what your top one is. And all credit to Jahan Dotson. He's had an outstanding season, but it just speaks to how handicapped they become as an offense without anybody else getting into the end zone.
Dave, Tyler says it's not Mike Yurcich's fault and agrees with Nate that he simply does not have the talent. These are also not his recruits. That last part to me, I think is less so a part of the conversation. But is it? Like, how much of this do you think goes to the coaching staff? Because that's where everyone today is taking their bushels of blame squarely at the feet of the coaches in this game. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know this is a major talking point coming out of the game where we'll get to some of the other decisions for James Franklin in just a little bit. But in general, on the offense, how much do you blame coaching with these results?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give you the boring answer. I'm going to say you that it's both. It's talent and it's coaching, because that's always it. It's never one or the other, no matter how desperately we want to blame only Penn State's coaches. It's just never the case unless something very drastic happens. So yeah, I mean, look, Mike Yurcich has done some things well. Primarily, he's stopped this offense from being a turnover waiting to happen, right? This offense plays safer football. He's helped Sean Clifford not give the ball to the opposition at every opportunity like he did last season. But obviously, there's been some problems that he hasn't fixed, namely the running game, which, maybe we can talk about it. It did get a little better this weekend, but just generally, I mean, it's been abysmal, just super bad. And he's got to take some blame for that. And yeah, so I have a hard time just saying it's Mike Yursic's fault because it never is. Like,
Because it's
obviously
also Phil
there's some
Troutwine's
problems.
fault, right? It's
Right.
also Phil
Yeah,
Troutwine and mostly James Franklin's fault.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's where we're gonna end up with those things, even though it is a very complicated web of confluences that I think goes back even further than just on the field coaching. To Nate's point about talent and talent availability, this is a team that did not and refused to act in the transfer portal until the last 2 seasons, really. And I think that the lack of depth and the lack of players that support the top is a clear indication of that. And that's kind of my answer to Ryan's question here. How do you feel about this team not being able to hit big plays outside of Jahan Dotson? Also, the pieces don't seem to fit Yursic's scheme. Nate, we talked about this a little bit already, but is that a fair way to look at this as well? Of you're recruiting players and you've got some talent at the receiver position, but you haven't been able to get players that are veteran enough to play and be ready to play. They've got a redshirt freshman tight end. They've got a redshirt freshman receiver. They've got a redshirt freshman receiver. And they've got, I think 5 or 6 of the guys they're relying on are freshmen or lower considering the COVID year.
Yeah, I mean, but they thought that Parker Washington would take a step. They thought that Keandre Lambert-Smith would take a step. And I'm not sure that at the beginning of the season, it didn't seem like those guys had taken a step. And I mean, I'm looking through the stat sheet today. Parker Washington made a couple of big catches on Saturday, right? One was for 44 yards. I think the other one was for 20. Both of them put Penn State into the fringe red zone. Like, those are important. It's just the frequency with which Penn State stalls its drives in games where every opportunity is gold. It's unworkable. You have to be able to come up with something. And I mean, to me, that's everybody that I saw reacting to Saturday was very, very frustrated by the sequence at Penn State's last offensive possession, right? And T. Frank, I'm thrilled. I caught a little bit of your post game. It wasn't that possession. It was the one before it.
It was
the one before it.
It's where you get the ball in the red zone and you get 3 yards.
They got the ball at the 16-yard line, went 3 yards, had to kick a field goal. That's the game. Because if you get a touchdown there, right? I mean, just even taking up more time off the clock, like anything you could not lay an egg there, and Penn State laid an egg.
Yep.
And to me, those are the ones where I think you have to ask yourself, I get it. There are lots of problems. And I'm going to sound like a fan right now. You got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what the playbook looks like, what your favorite plays are, what your absolute bread and butter is. And I mean, I guess that's the problem is they don't have it. They don't. There is no bread or butter.
There is something to be said, and I broke down a couple of the plays in the film review that's up now at Blue White Illustrated. But that sequence of plays in general, I broke down the final play. That was the third down where Sean Clifford had pressure in his face. He gets hit and basically has to throw it away. So it looks like it's an intended fade route to Cam Sullivan-Brown. That's not the play. That was a throwaway because on the first 2 plays, Penn State ran their quarterback power with the speed option. That means that you've got Kevon Lee running in the flat, and they had run it 2 or 3 times. They had pitched it every single time. It was the right time to make that call to have the quarterback keep the ball, except for the offensive line didn't block it. Like you've got your guys in position. Rasheed Walker and Bryce Effner were in position to make the plays. They didn't block any of the linebackers. They stayed on their original block, and then when Effner was in space, he didn't even make contact with the linebacker. Like that, you've got to hit somebody. And I'm not. It always comes out as singling out one individual player in situations, but it's an accumulation of those mistakes of the designs and the schemes from when I watch them on film going, that should work, and then it doesn't. Michigan played good defense there in the end, but some of those plays got hit. And the plays at the end of the game, So let's start with the 4th and 2, because we do have to talk about the coaching decisions. We do have to talk about some of the play calls and situations that Penn State got into. Again, another critical situation. Jahan Dotson is not on the field, and it's 4th and 2. Penn State runs a play that results in Cam Sullivan-Brown being targeted on a deep ball when you need 2 yards. Dave, I mean, I don't want to ask you how do you get there, but how do you let yourself get there, and how do you get out of that situation if you are put in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same questions, right? I guess, my issue with that play, and please, T. Frank, I'm sure that, you have some takes here, so feel free to interrupt me if you disagree, but my thought is, how is that the first option? Because it looks like it's the first option, right?
Right.
So it's what I don't understand is that's like, to me, the way that play came about, like, Penn State was never going to do anything else on that play, the way that it looked, which to me seems a little crazy considering Cam Sullivan-Brown is hardly, this amazing wide receiver who's been a stud for his entire career here. And you need 2 yards again. So it just doesn't feel like maybe they thought, okay, we can take the top off the defense here because they're going to be expecting us to do something underneath. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem logical to me. The
problem with that play was that they ran it. And this is, so the situation is this gets into the coaching decisions. It's 4th and 2. Penn State has 3 timeouts. They're going for the ball on their own side of the field. If they don't make it, they need to stop the clock 3 times. So you get into a situation where Michigan is playing, and this is directly from the Baltimore Ravens. This is directly from their playbook. They've got linebackers or pass rushers lined up in the A gap, forcing you to make decisions in pass protection. In that situation, they zone blitz and they drop 2 of those guys, and they take away the slant routes that are the primary routes. Now, on that play, Parker Washington needs to get open. He needs to not, at the top of his route, stop trying to fake the guy out. You need 2 yards. Did you not see how many linebackers they had at the line of scrimmage? So there's multiple elements on the play. But because they bracketed the slant routes from the tight ends, the only throw available was that go ball. And if that's a part of the play, you need to call a timeout because you're not getting the ball back. It doesn't matter. To me, that's the decision you have to make there is you have to call a timeout. You have to... They've burned that look. Now you know what they're going to do. Get into a different situation. Even if Jahan Dotson doesn't come back on the field, which is what James Franklin said, get into a different formation. Get somewhere else because you lose the game on that play. And they rode with that particular situation. Nate, the fake field goal. I don't even know where to start with this in particular because, as I said earlier, and I said in the postgame, it's an opinion whether or not you think they should go for it or take the points. Do you think they should go for it or take the points there?
So I am adamantly in favor of going for a touchdown in that situation. Because of all the things that I just talked about. They have so infrequently found themselves at the 2-yard line outside of 9 overtimes against Illinois that you have got to make it count. Michigan, and we're talking about a time and place in the game where you're not exactly sure how this one's going to go, right? But Michigan's scoring 36 points a game coming into it. You need points. You're not expecting to be able to hold Michigan to 14 for the duration of the game. 21, even with the broken play, is outstanding, given what Michigan has done through the season, right?
Given college football in general, just college football's holding anyone under 28 points is an accomplishment for a defense.
Correct. And so my backing is absolutely you go for it. It is as good of a look as you're going to get, good of an opportunity as you're going to get. You want to instill some confidence in your guy, right? Like all of those things. However, and this is a major however.
Can I cut you off here? Because I want to ask
me off.
I want to ask Dave this question because I think that's the perfect setup. How do you go for it, Dave?
Great question.
And I know, Nate, I know you were primed to get into it, but I just like it. What do you do? Like, how do you put the ball in the hands of your kicker? Dave, do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, you can't do what Penn State did there, certainly. But what I might do is, I think Penn State ran the ball pretty well. I don't hate running the ball on 4th and 2, and maybe they didn't have that established at that point in the game. But I just anything but that, right? Like that's what it is. It's anything but that. You already got cute once. It worked. You're going back to the well, really? Like I don't know. I hated it. I hated it so much.
Now, Nate, now to get the engine revved back up again, did you hate it so much like Dave did?
I wouldn't have hated it as much had I not heard James Franklin's explanation in the postgame that you need to lead the receiver, right? Yeah. You can't throw it behind the receiver. Okay. Yeah. All good. Point made. Who is more qualified to throw a pass that will lead the receiver?
Careful now.
Sean Clifford or your holder?
Based on the previous play where Sean Clifford led his receiver out of bounds for an easy touchdown. But you're right. Over the span of the game, I would imagine Sean Clifford.
That's all I got is I understand the mentality behind wanting to be aggressive.
Yep.
I am fully supportive of that. I think that they had the exact. I mean, people will complain about going for it on 4th and 5 at Ohio State, right? We're going back to some of these like individual calls that Penn State has made that fans have questioned. No, that was the right call too. The analytics say that was the right call. You go for it, especially in a game where you have to score points. You only get the ball so many times a game, right? It's going to be 12 to 14 times a game.
They got it 11 times. 11 times on Saturday because of the way that Michigan plays.
You got to cash in when you get the chance. Penn State has to do like nobody's complaining about the fake punt. You could have punt there and pinned them deep and given your defense an opportunity to shut them down because that's what Jordan Stout does is he pins them inside the 5. Okay, fine. Nobody has a problem with that call because it worked. And I don't want to get into the whole, well, it worked, it didn't work, pro or con, but the choice to go for it is not the problem. The problem is your execution and your choice of how to go for it.
Yeah,
it is just not. It wasn't going to give you the best chance of success.
Yeah. So the other part of this that I think is critically important to have in perspective, you mentioned drives. Penn State averages 13 drives a game. For an inefficient offense, they need as many cracks at the ball as possible, and that wasn't going to happen against Michigan with the way they like to bleed the clock. So when you get the ball, you need to make it happen. And in that situation, two things have happened. First off, the game flow has gone completely in your favor, where you've gotten the fake punt, you've driven down the field, you're in scoring position. You need to get 7. Now, you go for it in that situation, and you don't get any points. If you kick the field goal, you're still up by 1 score. You go up 10 points in this situation, you have changed the dynamic of the game early. And Penn State had 36 plays to start the game, and then another, I think one of their plays was a 9-play, 33-yard drive. So they held the ball the majority of the first half of the game. They got, 6 points or 3 points out of it? They needed 13. Make Michigan chase you, and that changes the game completely. That's what they were trying to go for with that particular play. Another thing that I think shades this particular conversation is the result of the play, and I don't mean just that they didn't get it, but then Jordan Stout fumbled the ball, and the ball ends up at the 30. If Michigan is at the 3, let's just say he loses a yard or maybe doesn't score, but he gets to the 1. You give them the ball at the 1. not the 30. It changes everything. The execution of the play was as much the problem as deciding to go for it with your punter, with your kicker, with your punter, kicker, kickoffer guy. Is there is there anything other, like, is there any validity? And I because I know people want to say just take the points. Can you just take the points there? I know what we just laid out, but Penn State lost by 2 field goals, and they had an opportunity at 2 field goals, and they lost. Is there a scenario where you play out the string the other way, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're ranking my like tiers of options, like go for it, take the points. All the way down here is weird, like fake field goal thing that just doesn't work at all. So you know, like would I have agreed with it? No. Would I have thought it was super egregious? Also, no. Because again, this game kind of turned out how we thought it was going to. It was a defensive battle, and neither offense was great. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have hated it, I guess, is the answer. But I don't think it was the right choice.
After the game, I want to bring this up because this kind of wraps up this conversation of, I mentioned in the postgame show that I don't think James Franklin, it's overblown that he's a bad game day manager as far as a coach.
Oh, boy.
He's not. So bad is like outright blowing games. I said he is maybe an average game day manager, maybe slightly below average as a game day manager. Is that a fair assessment of how James Franklin has conducted himself on the sidelines? Or am I wrong? Or is John right here to say that I am completely wrong and James Franklin is a terrible game day manager and he is losing Penn State football games? Nate, what's the reality there and what isn't? In your opinion, which is not a fact, but it's an opinion. Because that's what all of these are.
I don't know. I am confounded by the lack of recognition of games Penn State has won that it didn't need to win, or that it wasn't right. Like, I understand that we're going back a little bit here, but Michigan 2019 was a good win. I think that was a good win. Penn State has won. Wisconsin at the beginning of the season was a good win. Auburn was a good win. It just, the fixation as like on the 1 or 2 calls that people disagree with, that generally speak, because they didn't work out. I don't know. I mean, I think that I am on track with you in the sense of way too much is made of that, way too much, and the field goal, the fake field goal, is really the perfect example of that, because the amount of pushback that I saw as to, oh, you just take the points, you just take the points, you just take the points. Nope. You coach for the team that you have, and the team that you have this year can't get in the end zone. So if you are served up on a platter an opportunity to get into the end zone, you got to take that. Messed up the call? Okay, I can live with that. I think that's a fair critique.
Yeah.
But the notion that wasn't the right call in that moment, and then outside of that, what are we talking about?
Timeout usage. Timeout usage, end of half situations, making sure that you call a timeout in the right moment. Really, to me, that's the biggest thing, is timeout management that people hate about coaches. And again, Dave, how big of an impact does timeout management have on a game?
Yeah, it really impacted that Maryland game, right? I think they lost that one, didn't they? But no, I mean, seriously, like, I guess what confuses me is this view that Penn State should be like unbeaten right now. Like, they have a bottom 30 offense in college football. Their offense is not good. And that, I'm sorry, but you don't make up for that with a timeout here or a better play call here. Like, you just don't. I don't understand that. If you want to critique some things that happen individually, sure. But I guess I just don't agree with like this big picture narrative that's existing right now after this game, that Penn State is 6-4 because James Franklin keeps getting in their way. Like I don't think that's true. I don't think that's accurate at all.
I think that's a great way to put it, Dave. Like
Yep.
specifically that, as though James Franklin is inhibiting what would otherwise be a wildly successful Penn State football team. Like it's not. They have a great defense. This
Yep.
is an like unbelievably good defense, and it has absolutely no offense to pair with it. And we shouldn't be surprised given how bad last season was, when all of the same faces and names are back outside of Kirk Shiraka.
Yep. And just in case you're joining us late, we have discussed the 4th and 2 call. So if you want to check that back out on the replay later or on the podcast, you can always do that. And so that you don't miss those in the future, make sure you subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, and you get the notifications by hitting the notification button, so you know we're live Mondays at noon. You can join the whole show and you don't miss a thing. If you want to get a question in the chat, make sure you send one in. We're going to be answering those. Like Mike's here. He asked this question: any word on Mike Miranda, who left the game in the, I think, the early stages of the second quarter, did not return? What did James Franklin have to say after the game, Nate?
He just said that he wasn't available. Like people read into it as though that was a coach's decision to pull him from the game based on performance. But he was pretty clearly dinged up. And I think I feel comfortable saying that that was something that appeared to be the case prior to the game as well.
Okay.
I don't think he got hurt in the. I mean, it may have exacerbated the issue, but I think he had trouble going into the game.
Yeah, there was, after watching the replay 3 times this weekend, there was no point where there's any noticeable injury to Mike Miranda, which then led me to believe in some of my analysis that he was pulled because he was being beaten pretty thoroughly in pass protection to begin the game. And it did seem to level things out when Juice Scruggs went over to center and they brought in Bryce Effner and kept Eric Wilson at left guard. What was your assessment of the run game? We spent a lot of time on a bunch of other things to begin the show, but the bright spot was Penn State ran for, I think, 150 yards if you don't include the sack totals. In this game, they ran for 4.4 yards per carry from the top 2 backs. Sean Clifford broke the pocket and got a lot of yards in scramble situations. How do you think... I know I asked you this last week, Nate, and you said, I don't really care. Does Kevon Lee's performance this week sway you at all?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm on board. I'm fine. I don't... was it so out of this world to like, oh, clear-cut winner? No, I don't think I would say that. However, John Lovett let the team down in the passing game. I don't think there's a better way to put that. Like, I mean, it sounds more harsh than I intended, but that was a problem. And then obviously, you know, it appears to me that Penn State has landed on Noah Cain not having the effectiveness that he needs to have to be able to remain a viable option. Like, it seems like that has all right. Yeah. So you move forward, and really Lee's what you got. So I think that he did as well as, you know, Penn State could have hoped for in that circumstance. And I think it was a good day for him. I mean, it just, the problem remains the same, is he got to the safety and got tackled.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Both of them did on a regular basis. So, Dave, say something to make everyone feel better, because Penn State fans are not feeling great today. So if you could, say something about the running game that is nice, either about the offensive line or the running backs.
I refuse. But Sean Clifford ran the ball a little bit. There you go. There's something. I just have to point this out, and this is actually doing the opposite of what you just asked me to do. But Kevon Lee had a Pro Football Focus pass block grade, T. Frank, of 5.3.
Yeah.
I have never seen that before. I don't know if that was a mistake. I don't know what's going on there.
Nope.
My God.
Nope.
Nope. I give him a little bit more credit in that situation. I understand why he got such a bad grade. The play that we already talked about, where Penn State had to kick a field goal afterwards and Sean Clifford got turned into goo. He's reading two potential blitzers, and he reads it, and he just gets there so slowly. Like, he's reading the A gap to the B gap. Those are his responsibilities. And the A gap is picked up because it's a zone pressure and they're dropping defensive linemen. So the center's there to pick up the A gap. And he sees it, and he just moseys his way on over to the B gap and whiffs. And yeah, you need to have a better effort there. But I guess when I look at those situations from oh my gosh, is the sky falling for Penn State? That's a physical loss, not a mental loss. So it's not like he didn't know where he was going. He just couldn't get there. Does that make anybody feel any better? Nate, does that make you feel any better about that situation?
I mean, maybe, because he didn't last year, right? I mean, that was a part of the hang up in the first place.
Yeah.
So knowing where to be is maybe half the battle, but there's just a lot of work to do. I mean, I think that's stating the obvious, but there is one of two things needs to happen. Either the offseason needs to be one of marked development in a lot of areas offensively, or they got to find some new guys in certain situations.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly what the answer is there, but yeah, I mean, I think that you're looking for steps anywhere you can get them, and certainly knowing where to be is at least a little bit of one. So sure.
Yeah. So the receivers, I think we have a pretty good feel of what that group is so far this season. We touched on them a little bit. There's one little nugget, by the way, if you want to check out in my odds and ends section of my film review about what happened with Keandre Lambert-Smith. It explains why Cam Sullivan-Brown was on the field for the end of the game. Do you agree with the idea of benching a receiver for drops? Because that's what happened on Saturday, and that's why he wasn't out there in those critical situations. Dave, running backs get benched for fumbles. Is that a fair thing to do, and was that a wise decision by Taylor Stubblefield and the offensive staff?
You can't catch the ball. I mean, yeah, I don't hate it. Again, that's a huge part of their job. So if you don't have confidence that a guy can catch the football, then yeah, I'm fine with it, to be honest. It might be harsh. It might sound harsh, but if you're a wide receiver, you have to catch the ball. And if you're not making a marked difference doing something else, right? If you're not an elite run blocker, if you're not, a really important decoy otherwise, I put somebody else out there who's going to catch the ball. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, nobody else caught the ball, but the ball wasn't really put on the frame of anyone to catch the ball in those situations anyway. So it was a lot of stuff going on at the end of the game that led to a lot of ugly situations, and I think that's the context of these conversations that are lost. Of, you don't have Jahan Dotson on the field because of the injury. You don't have Keandre Lambert-Smith on the field because of his continual drops. So that leaves you Parker Washington and the tight ends. And the tight ends have created zero separation this year, so you're in that's what you're in. That's what the situation you have to work with. So I want to move on to the defensive side of the ball. We have a couple of minutes here left on the BWI Live show. If you're at this point, even if you're hate watching, you're still watching. So hit the like button, please, and let everybody else know that you're having a good time so they can join us for the end of the show, and everyone knows that we do a good job here on the BWI Live. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. You see above me Nate Bauer, Dave Eckert. They are our writers and our extraordinarily intelligent football people on Blue White Illustrated staff. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com to check out their work as we get into the final 2 weeks of the regular season. The defense, Nate, 14 points throughout most of the game, yet a critical touchdown late. They never make the narrative easy on us when we're talking about them. So, what are your thoughts on their performance?
Can I just interject something very quickly?
Sure.
Is that okay? Can I stop
Sure.
the program?
Sure.
James Franklin's not going to get fired. He's not going to get fired. I'm reading the comments. James Franklin will not get fired at Penn State. They can lose both the games that they have left on the regular season schedule. They can lose the bowl game. It will not matter. Okay.
Yeah. That's why I don't. It's why. By the way, if you're wondering, that's why we don't answer your questions or take those particular comments, because first off, we say it every week, and secondly, to what Nate said, there's no reality where Penn State's firing James Franklin.
Not anywhere. Anyway. Anyway. So defensively, no. I mean, look, like I think that it was an outstanding performance, and it got undone, as it has done a couple of times this season, by one play in the fourth quarter. And like, I don't know how you resolve that. I live in this constant state of conflict with myself in terms of, man, what an incredible defensive performance. Like, I mean, Michigan has just run the ball all over everyone. Cade McNamara has been a heady, mature, plotting quarterback who doesn't make mistakes. And Penn State, for the most part, did what it has done to everyone this season and limited Michigan moving the ball really between the 20s and had as much success as it could possibly hope for in that circumstance. However, you don't have to lose the game on a 50 touchdown broken play. Like, they didn't. It's tough because Hassan Haskins, even before that play, rips off a 17-yard run to start the possession after Penn State takes a lead, right? So you have gone from literally 10 minutes in real world time prior, right, where there did not appear to be a hypothetical in the world where Penn State could win that game. At 14-6, It was over. The game was over. The crowd was silent. Right? Like, I mean, the complete expectation was this was not going to happen. And by some incredible swing of momentum, Penn State scores a touchdown, converts a 2-point conversion. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah. Multiple fourth downs on that drive, by the way. I think there were 2 and the touchdown. So a clutch drive.
Arnold Ebiketie gets not just a sack fumble.
Yeah.
And they recovered the ball. Like, you could not have dreamt up a better situation. And so for as well as Penn State played defensively in the 55 minutes prior to that possession for Michigan, they let it slip. They let it go. And I mean, I'm not sure how you reconcile those two realities, because you don't want to put any blame on a team and a defense that limited its opponent to 21 points. But the game ended up being a loss because there was a 50-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter.
Dave, the man responsible on that play, you could say, could be Brent Pry, could be his freshman corner that was out there in that play. To give you a quick breakdown of the touchdown, in case you haven't seen it yet or you didn't see the replay, it's man coverage. They're running crossing routes, which is the only thing they had run all day, just crossing routes. And Kalen King, who is supposed to run over the top of the other defensive backs and avoid those things, runs directly into Daquan Hardy because freshman, as far as my analysis is, because freshman. He was out there in that situation because he played more snaps than he had at all this season. Do you put your freshman cornerback out there on that particular drive when you need to win the game and you only got a touchdown? Second guess here for me, because that's what I think everyone wants to do today. Is that the right decision there?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Because look, if you believe in Kalen King, put him out there. He's your future, right? He's your future at the cornerback position. If you believe in him to the extent that he's playing, I don't know, 30 snaps. I don't have the snap count in front of me, but he played a lot.
I think it was 27.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if he's playing that much, I let him get that experience. I mean, breaking news here, guys. Penn State is not winning the national championship this year. I don't know if you guys have noticed that.
You guys are so mean.
So, like, but I mean, let the kid play. I'm fine with it. If you think he's good, if you believe in him, if you think he's intelligent and he's mature, like we've been hearing since spring ball, give him a shot. And look, it didn't pay off.
Yeah,
it sucks. He'll learn from it, and he'll be better for it. I don't know. It doesn't seem awful to me.
Part of that too, and this is something that I saw coming into the game, was you can't eliminate one part of your playbook because of the play you're playing, but you should definitely reduce it. And on Saturday, Cade McNamara is very good against the blitz. One of the few things he does well, he doesn't create big throws, but he makes you pay for bringing players out of underneath coverage. He was 9 of 11 for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns when Penn State blitzed him. They blitzed him 12 times. So he made them pay almost on every single drop back where they sent 5-man pressures or more. And on that play, they sent an extra rusher because Brent Pry is an aggressive play caller, and he's not going to sit back even against guys that I don't think he should blitz. Nate, is that a fair critique? Or do you have to just be who you are in those situations?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, do you let go of your identity? I don't know. I mean, I think those are tough decisions. That's what coordinators get paid a ton of money to decide. Obviously, they made the decision. I mean, I think the thing that stands out to me, both from that play on Saturday as well as the Iowa game, is it was Penn State's failure more than it was by a considerable margin than anything that either of those other two teams did. Right? Like tight end made a play. I get it. And apparently was hobbled before the game. So the fact that he was able to take that and get into the end zone is something. But, Penn State had that opportunity in front of it and just had a lapse at a time when you can't afford to have a lapse. Beyond that, I don't know. It's the same thing that I've said. I remain conflicted over how much you can really, right? Because I think that you're still trying to make a play, right? Like you're still in a situation where they've got the ball at midfield. You need to hold them to a field goal, but you want to win the game, and your defense is the only thing that is providing, right? Like for the defense to feel like it has to win the game, you can't blame them.
Yeah.
You can't blame them for taking that.
They gave Penn State the ball. They gave their offense the ball inside the 20, and then they're back out on the field 3 plays later. So yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't have a problem with it. It just seems to be the timing, right? There seems to be something clutch missing from this defense where they get all the way up to the edge of an epic performance and drag this team to a win, and then they just don't.
The one thing that I would add to that, that I think might be a common thread between that Iowa play and this Michigan play, is that in both instances, the quarterback said after the game that they had kind of saved that look for a big moment in the game and used it because they kind of had a feeling what Penn State was going to run. So maybe we might have a situation where Penn State is a little bit too predictable late in the games in key situations. I don't know. Yeah. Cade McNamara said after the game that, Penn State likes to play man coverage, as we know, in big time downs. They anticipated the man coverage, ran that mesh route, and it worked. So Iowa's quarterback, whose name is escaping me, said something similar after the Iowa game. So,
Spencer Petras.
Yeah, how dare I forget Spencer Petras' name.
I apologize for being on my phone a little bit earlier, but I wanted to pull up. My buddy Brian texted me during the game. He's a Penn State fan. And Saturday at 1:26 p.m., he says, Michigan out there being a bully. Then he says, having their way with the O-line. Offense, they're just grinding time on offense. Do you agree with my buddy Brian that Michigan was able to bully the Penn State run defense, Nate?
As the game wore on, maybe. Certainly not initially. Yeah. I thought that Penn State, one of the things that was, this is my perception, I didn't go back to look. I felt like Michigan was in a lot of second and third and longs, certainly in the first half of that game. I don't know if that carried over as much to the second half. I thought
they stopped false starting.
Yeah.
They had 4 false starts that essentially killed a couple of drives because they can't play off schedule.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they averaged... They averaged 3.5 yards per rush, and that's not sack adjusted. I can't do that math that quickly. But, that's not amazing. It's...
Yeah. When I watch the film, if you're gonna not having Blake Corum was a huge thing for the Michigan offense because Ronnie Bell and Blake Corum were the explosive elements of this offense, and they obviously lost Ronnie Bell early in the season, so that's gone. They've had to adjust without that. They've been getting all of their explosive plays from the running game. And they didn't have that in this situation. So they had to rely on a tight end against a freshman corner and then Hassan Haskins just running through guys. One of the things that really bothered me about this particular offensive performance is that it won. From a philosophical perspective, they play 1984 football is still too early, is still too late in the process to really give you an example of what they play. The way I phrased it earlier today is this. The reason linebackers exist, going back to the foundations of running the football, are because of the offensive scheme that Michigan runs. So we've figured out, as a football community, how to stop power and counter and pull plays like 60 years ago. And Michigan is not bigger or stronger enough than Penn State to make it be the reason they won that game. And to Michigan fans that are upset at hearing that, when you face a team that is explosive and can throw the football effectively down the field with good weapons, you will not win those games because you're playing a style of football that is easily stopped with just discipline, intelligence, and linebackers that get to the point of attack. That's it. And then they threw crossing routes the whole game. The frustration for me is watching the most basic football win. And it was because the Penn State offense scored 17 points. So I don't really know where to go with that, but that's my frustration of watching this particular game from an analytical perspective is this shouldn't have worked. It shouldn't have worked. And it worked enough.
But it doesn't this kind of speak to, I think the frustration of a lot of Penn State fans is that Penn State is being built to play with and beat teams out of its own conference, absent Ohio State and maybe Indiana. And so if you get into a situation like Penn State is this year where it doesn't have the explosiveness, it finds itself on. Look, Illinois was the same deal, wasn't it? Wisconsin, right? And so Wisconsin, Penn State found a way to get to 16, but if I think that there is a certain level of disappointment that Penn State isn't better suited to be able to compete with that style of game that you're talking about when it has to. Yeah. And this is a year that it has to, and it can't, right? The Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan.
Yep.
These are programs setting the game back hundreds of years. I mean,
and that's the question too, Dave.
I'm kidding.
Kind of like you can run power and counter, and you can run those as a part of your system if it's a part of your system, because the whole point is getting the defense to be off kilter. A lot of modern offenses throw in wrinkles on the backside so that you have to pay attention and you can't just run the front side. Michigan doesn't care because they're running the same thing on the broadcast. They talked about the production meetings with Jim Harbaugh, and he was talking about Bo Schembechler pad level. So yes, that is setting the game back to a certain degree because he is turning the clock back on time to win these games. So Dave, should you be set up to win the games in your conference and let the chips fall where they may once you get to your postseason, or is James Franklin's archetypal plan correct for Penn State?
I think, maybe it depends on what you want from Penn State, right? I guess the vibe that I get from Penn State fans is, especially with how angry, they seem to be right now, is that they want to win. They want to make the college football playoff. They want to, right? That's what they want to do. I don't think you make the college football playoff playing Michigan football, and I think Michigan is going to find that out against Ohio State. But yeah, so it depends what you want. If you're cool with 9-3, 10-2 because you're playing that kind of football and you're bigger and better than most of the other teams you're playing at it, sure. But I don't think that's the vision that James Franklin has for Penn State, and I don't think that's what most Penn State fans would be content with if there isn't the potential for something higher. So I don't know. It kind of depends on your personal preference.
So then the point becomes, and this is, I guess, the part that I find hilarious is, Nate, James Franklin, great recruiter, can't coach, but he can't recruit the players to play that way right now. The explosive players aren't there. So are we saying that the tried and true narrative that I see every single time, like I get tired of seeing great recruiter can't coach because that's a part of the story, and I'm not trying to further bury James Franklin. I'm just pointing out some obvious narrative flaws in the argument about James Franklin. Is that also not a part of the story? And we got to wrap up soon, so I apologize. But please answer the question.
Look, like Jahan Dotson is elite. He is an elite playmaker. Anybody in the country would take Jahan Dotson on their team. So there's one. But the breadth is not there right now. It's not there at running back. I think that there are arguments to be made that Journey Brown would dramatically make things different for this Penn State offense. A healthy Noah Cain.
Yep.
Right. And who knows if that guy still exists, but a healthy Noah Cain would change that. Certainly you had higher expectations for some of the receivers that you have playing right now. You would have hoped that some of the development of a guy like Malik Mega would have come along a little bit faster, but he was injured. Like, some of this stuff is just beyond their control. You're not, when somebody gets hurt, they're not only losing the opportunity to make an impact in that moment, they're losing the opportunity to develop. And so, like that, there are these big gaping holes that Penn State just isn't able to, like, magically wave a wand and undo the fact that as a program, institutionally, they were prohibited from practicing as a team last year until the latter third of the season. Like, there's all this stuff that goes into it that makes it really, really difficult to explain.
Dave, your final thoughts before we wrap up here today.
Yeah, I guess I saw what I expected to see. It's not a surprise. I thought that was how that game was going to go. The Penn State injected some controversy and some things to talk about for us in there, certainly. I just kind of business as usual. Michigan is better than Penn State this year. They are. Sorry. Yeah. And that game played out in a way that indicated that. So, yeah, I'm not running around with my hair on fire here. I just think it is what it is.
Nate, what about you? What are your final thoughts as we head into Rutgers week?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll be very interested to see what happens this week. I really am. And I understand that this is a game with a points, like a 21 point again is insane to me for a Penn State team that can't score points. So I don't know how that happens other than pitching a shutout. I would hammer Rutgers if I was a betting man. But no, like I just see this problem of where Penn State is in the pecking order. And this is something that goes back to basketball for me personally, is they're caught in the middle. They're not good enough to be on the elite side of the conference. Not that the conference is loaded with elite teams. It's not, but it's just, that's what happened. You know, you lose your quarterback and all of a sudden a game that you probably should have won at Iowa, you lose. But you beat Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is now starting to show itself being pretty good. Like they are who they are, and who they are this year is a step below the top.
Yep.
But still above really the rest. And I understand that people are going to argue about Illinois, but I think that my point remains.
Yeah. The only thing I'll disagree with the two of you is that, Dave, I agree with you that it was a game they could lose, but it was a game that they could have also won, and they didn't. And the offense that is more set up to score points scored fewer points. Again, I'll just go back to I can believe it because of this particular Penn State team.
Yeah.
But I just can't believe that offensive philosophy won on that day, because Penn State knew how to stop it, and they did. So I think that should be the most frustrating thing for Penn State, is that particular team, that 6th-ranked team in the nation, they could have beat if they had some semblance of a consistent offense. And that's going to be the rest of the season. I think the same thing is true with Michigan State after this Rutgers game. And we'll be back to wrap up all of those games on Monday here on the BWI Live Monday Recap Show. Join us. I know it's a holiday week. We'll be here on Monday as we get ready for the holiday season to wrap up Penn State and Rutgers. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. For Nate Bauer and Dave Eckert, you've been listening to the BWI Live Show.